1979, and I was working as director of special projects for the CBS station in Denver, Colorado. And in the 5 or 6 years prior to that, I had done documentary films on science, medicine, and the environment. That was my goal as a television producer, to investigate problems. And suddenly, in Canada, the United States, and other parts of the world, there was an upsurge again on these stories about animals being found with an ear missing, an eye missing, the tongue deep within the throat, the lower jaw stripped, the genitals removed, the rectum removed, and all bloodless. And in every case, it was being reported that there were no tracks around the animals, not even the animals' tracks. That was what was making law enforcement and ranchers look to the sky and say the only way that these animals could be laid down on even wet ground or snow with no tracks around them is that somebody must be taking them in the air and then putting them back down. So right from the beginning of the animal mutilation story, this association with something in the sky started. The whole mystery goes back actually to the 60s, but I was not involved in any investigations prior to the fall of '79, and then I naively thought, I will get to the bottom of this story and I will do an environmental contamination report. That's what I thought. And 9 months later, my documentary, A Strange Harvest, was broadcast. And in it, for the first time, was the link with the UFO phenomenon and the mutilations through eyewitnesses. The eyewitnesses were police and sheriffs and deputies and ranchers who had seen football field-sized orange glowing lights in pastures where mutilated animals were found the next morning. There were many reports of beams of light coming down into pastures, and people said it looks like a helicopter, but there was no sound. Then one night, I was working on the documentary A Strange Harvest, and I was interviewing a man who worked in the United States. There are district attorneys' offices in various cities, and they handle various kinds of criminal investigations. And this man, Lou Girotto, was head of an investigation in a city called Trinidad, Colorado, in which for several years he had been trying to understand what was happening to animals. Because in Colorado, literally hundreds and hundreds of cases of animal mutilations every year, as well as in other states. And one night, sitting across with the camera running, he looked at me and he said, in answer to the question, well, what do you think could possibly be mutilating the animals? He said, other investigators and I have discussed this, and we have come to the conclusion that we are dealing with creatures not from this planet, that they come and go here for reasons that are unknown, and that they camouflage themselves as helicopters and other things that we would recognize so that they can get their work done under camouflage. And by the time that my documentary was first broadcast, I think what intrigues me is that it was almost like a bomb went off. Hundreds of phone calls and letters started coming to me at the station with people saying, I've never told anyone this before. And then I would hear a story about a light, a story about a mutilation, as if this is one of the underground stories of our time. These odd things are happening. People are afraid to report them. The media is not covering it. It is as if there is an underground phenomenon all around us and that it is worldwide, but everyone is saying it doesn't exist, and therefore it's just sort of never acknowledged in the general public and general media, except for my work.
So no satanic pagan rites or the action of predators, other hypotheses? Why not?
Well, clearly, I mean, I've looked at predator, disease, satanic cults, the government as possible explanations for the phenomenon. This is the problem. Thousands of animals die around the world every year from disease. Thousands of animals die around the world every year from predator. No That's not an issue. But when you look at photographs of disease, if you look at photographs of dead animals that have been eaten on by predation, in my book, An Alien Harvest, there's a photograph that shows what coyotes did to a cow. And it's totally decimated. I mean, even the bones are pulled apart. The hide is totally torn. The animal's torn apart. The mutilations have always been unique because the animal lies on its side or on its knees or on its back with very strange excisions that are so surgically precise, and no blood and no tracks. Predators do not do that. You will hear, and this is true, foxes will burrow into the rectum of an animal. Yes, they will. There's gnaw marks. Magpies can sit and pluck out the eye. And there are peck marks. We're talking about cases where neither of those signs are there, and it's associated with these other patterns of excisions. Then, one of the most important things I think that's happened in the last decade is I wanted to separate out predator and disease from something strange. And I'll get to satanic cults in a minute. But I just wanted, me personally, I wanted to satisfy myself in cases. Is this predator? Could this be disease or something else? So I started working with a pathologist named Dr. John Altschuler in Colorado in 1989. And now in 1994, we've examined tissue from, it's almost 50 animals now. And they range from rabbits, cats, horse, a lot of cattle. And in about 80% of those cases that we've examined so far, the excision lines have been cut with something hot. The hemoglobin is cooked under a microscope examination. The temperature of what it takes for hemoglobin to cook is pretty well known. It's somewhere 300, 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is in centigrade. So we know that some kind of a heat was applied, or something that at least heated. Could be sound waves also that heated the cell water. There are other medical aspects of examination of these tissue which automatically say that these were not made by predator and it's not a disease. Satanic cults. I have visited and been asked actually by detectives and sheriffs to compare notes on cases where they were trying to arrest or deal with satanic cult activity. And I've sat in a meeting with a detective and a sheriff, and they have looked at my book, my photos, and then they have shown me what they're dealing with, and there's no resemblance. What satanic cults do to a cow and a human is horrible. Excuse me a moment. I was about to sneeze. One way or the other, I would have had to interrupt with a sneeze or... And when you consider the fact that satanic ritual involves lots of blood, blood is poured on humans, blood is poured through animals. It's awful. It's just awful stuff. The hallmark of the strange animal mutilations has always been the lack of blood. It's the opposite. That is the bottom line. It is exactly the opposite. Government. What government would have the resources or the motive to sustain a worldwide operation from the 1960s to the 1990s in every continent and hundreds of countries, making the same exact excisions from animals? Does that make any sense? No. Yeah.
And is there a cover-up about the mutilation of animals in your opinion?
A cover-up. Is there a cover-up? Yes, definitely. And probably the best story to reinforce that is that in 1983, I was taken on to Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico, by an Air Force Office of Special Investigations agent named Richard C. Doty. I was there working on a film for Home Box Office, and I thought, at the AFOSI office to get some information about an alleged landing of a UFO on an Air Force base in the United States. That's what I thought I was there. And the first thing this man said to me in the office was, you know, that documentary you did, A Strange Harvest, upset some people in Washington. They don't want animal mutilations and UFOs connected together in the public's mind. And it was the implication that he was saying that my documentary was true and it was going public, and the government didn't want that to happen. And subsequently, I've had several other intimations that our government is extremely sensitive about the connection between animal mutilations and the UFO phenomenon, and I think it's clearly why. If you can't, as a government, stop something, if you have no control over, we'll call it an alien agent intruding on your planet, that's something you don't want the public to know. On the other hand, my personal feeling is that we humans as a family on the planet, we deserve the truth, especially about something as important as contact with another intelligence in the universe. And in that context, I have tried very hard to pursue whatever the truth is. I just want to know what the truth is. I would like to know whether there are 1, 2, 3, 4 different types interacting with our planet. Do they have different motives? Are they all working together? Is there a story that is eons, millennium long here? Is there a tracking of genetic and bloodlines on this planet for yet unknown reasons? There's some circumstantial evidence to suggest that that's true, because in the human abductions, most of the researchers there feel that if you haven't been abducted by around age 4, 6, or 8, you're probably not going to be abducted. But people who are in the abduction syndrome, it usually starts when they're 4, 6, or 8 and continues up to perhaps their sexual ability to procreate aspect of their life may extend into their older years. In the animals, you find a pattern where year after year, decade after decade, it can be the same pasture. The mutilations occur in the same pasture over and over and over again. And that has made me think that maybe something is tracking, something genetically, something in blood. It tracks animals the same way it's tracking people for some reason. And that in the end, this question about are hybrids being created out of all of this, perhaps that will ultimately be the answer. I mean, Bud Hopkins certainly thinks that. And if hybrids are being created, not that they're taking an eyeball and testicles and a tongue to make something like, it's not at that gross level. It's the genetic material, perhaps, the DNA level, that's what I'm referring to, that they're extracting the DNA from various aspects. And they may be mixing and matching at the genome level. This is at the level of sophistication, I think, of what's happening. There may be an effort to create some other life form from the genetic material on this planet and something else. Then the big question is, why and where would these hybrids live? Where is the big end to this story? How long will the mutilations and abductions on the Earth continue? And I don't think any of us have any.
So you think that there is a relation between the two phenomena?
The mutilations and the abductions, absolutely. They have paralleled each other on track right from the beginning in the 60s, yes. The animals are left dead, humans are alive. Humans have no memory, the animals are missing tissue.
In the case history of the mutilation of